Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Montessori Thrive's Town Halls. We do these every Thursday during the school year. Um, we would love this to be a lively discussion, so feel free to unmute yourself if you have anything to say. We're back with Rupali Sharma, who was here with us last week. She is the leader of the TEC schools. And I think she has another interactive presentation. So feel free to put anything in the chat or unmute yourself too. So with that, I'll hand it over to Rupali.
Thank you. Julia, it's great to be back and wonderful to see some familiar names and faces again. I'm happy to talk about the idea of respect and collaboration. Maria Montessori, I am so always blown away by the fact that she was the first person to say respect the child. And that's a big shift in understanding how we work with a child. It's not just somebody who's there that we have to, it's not an empty vessel that we have to fill, but it's somebody who has a personality. And as young as a infant, toddler, or 3-year-old that we start with in our schools, we can help them become the person they are going to be because we can respect them for the individual that they are. But then, as a head of school or a board member or a teacher, a parent in the classroom, how do we take that idea of respect and how do we share it with the rest of our community? And what have, having worked at different Montessori schools and different organizations as an architect, I felt that um, we don't always extend the same grace and courtesy that we offer in our classrooms. We don't always extend that to the adults in our environment. And so I'd say, before we dig into this presentation, I'd like to say in chat, if you could all type in what is grace and courtesy? What does that mean to you? What does it mean when a head of school disagrees with a teacher or a teacher disagrees with a parent? What words come to your mind? And if you could type those in the chat, that'll be very, a good way to get started. So I'll give everybody a minute or two. And so the question is, what does grace and courtesy mean to you? You can put that in chat. And second, if a head of school or a parent or a teacher has a disagreement, how does grace and courtesy look to you? What would you say for grace and courtesy at that time? Okay. Any thoughts? All right. Positive body language. Thank you, Sylvia. Meaning and respectful conversation between adults, even though it's a conflict. And proper manners. Listen and respond without judgment. Thank you, Allison. Yeah, all of these are great, and we'll delve deeper into it. I'm going to share my screen. And let's see. Here we go. It's taking a little bit to load. So the reason I wanted to start with Montessori principles is because we are practitioners of Montessori principles. And when it comes to children, our classrooms are really wonderfully equipped with the grace and courtesy curriculum, with the peace rules, the peace table in the school, in the classroom. But then when it comes to adults, that's when we start seeing that, is there a culture of respect and collaboration throughout the school, throughout the organization, or is it only in the classroom and only particularly in one or two classrooms and not in the others? So let's look at what Maria Montessori had to say and we'll go from there. Dolores says, listening to others' point of view and respecting those views. So thank you for sharing that. So as an architect, and I worked as an architect in India before I became a Montessori educator and teacher. And something that as a young architect I found very interesting was when I would meet with my clients, and if it was a family or if it were an organization that I was working on with for a factory project or so, I found that people would disagree sometimes. And when you're coming to getting a vision and putting that vision on paper, making sure that everybody understands your vision and are following you as a head of school or a board of trustees, to rally everybody, it's important that they are respected for their individuality as well as for the leader's individuality. And together, they're following one path. But often it feels that the person who's leading has their own vision and discounts that other people may have an idea. And when that happens, then you're leading only by telling people what to do, but not really bringing everybody on board. As I grew into becoming a classroom teacher and then the curriculum director and a head of school, I found that the element of respect was so important for building trust. And without having that trust, people don't want to follow your directions. So I'll say that, when things get challenging and every school is in a state of fluidity throughout the school year, it's never static. Every day is a new day. Every day brings new challenges. And if there's a culture of respect, then everybody is going to jump in and help out, whether the head of school asks for help or not. But if there is no culture, then the head of school is dictating what to do. And there's a difference in the energy, the joyfulness that you see in the school. So I'd like to read this. Children are human beings to whom respect is due, superior to us by reason of their innocence and of the greater possibilities of their future. This holds true even for all adults that are working in the school. So I would say, all human beings deserve that respect because of their individual talents. What talents are they bringing to your school? Every teacher, every specialist, every parent has a gift. But are we taking the time to find out what those gifts are? Are we taking the time to learn who these people are? Or are we just going by our agenda, whether it is increasing enrollment, whether it is establishing a new school, whether it is growing to the next level or adding a new campus element, whatever it is, are we looking at the whole team or are we just pushing our agenda? And in this case, I would say, if you look at your team as a group of people all going towards the same point, then we can, looking at the same mission. And if everybody understands the why are we all here? Why are we united in this? Then we can bring all teachers on the same page. So I would say respect and collaboration. And the third pillar that we have at our school is innovation. So we have respect, collaboration, and innovation as the three pillars at our school, at the TEC school. And when I worked at different schools, I found that some teachers work in isolation and their classroom is working perfectly well, but it's their kingdom, it's their domain. And the rest of the school is not necessarily aligned with each classroom, right? Parents can sense that. parents can sense the disconnect. And then the question comes, can I have my child be part of that classroom? I would like that teacher. But your school is not just governed by, one teacher or one classroom culture. It has to be the whole school. And so if you have an integrated approach where all teachers are working together, if we look at a product that's been launched, let's say a computer program is being launched, and the entire organization works towards that program, or the team works towards that program. And so you have somebody working on the user interface, somebody working on the back end, somebody working on making sure that the program is delivered at the right time. And so having a whole team work together gives the student first the idea that all my teachers are aligned, and then secondly that also that for the parents it's helpful to see that the teachers are aligned on the same mission. So where when we look at the culture of the school, and I feel culture starts on the first day. How do you develop the culture in your school? Now, if you're starting your own school, um, it's great because you can decide what you want for your culture, right? But if you are inheriting a school and you're a new head of school, then you're looking at what was the culture before you came in, and what is going to be, your participation. If you look at some organizations that have been existing for a long time, we see that the founders have a certain culture. And then, based on the development of that organization, sometimes it becomes a top down culture. In some organizations, it becomes a culture of innovation. Another could be a culture of inquiry and problem solving. So think about your school. What is the culture at your school? Where are you happy with it? Do you want to change it? Do you want to change some part of it? Right. So one of the things that I have found, when we started our school, we said it has to be a culture of collaboration because we are a STEM school, and uh, the Montessori work that happens in the classroom also has to happen in the technology room, also has to carry over in the science room. And so at the beginning of the year, we spend a lot of time working together. And it's the preparation of the adult. So dedicating time for teachers to meet, for administrators to work with them and form that trust is key at the beginning of the year. So whether you have a board of trustees, whether you have a leadership team, you may have specialists. When do you give them time to connect? When do you bring them all together? And are they allowed to share ideas, or are they allowed to bring new projects? So one of the things that I'd like to highlight is the culture at Microsoft was changed when the new head started, Satya Nadella, where he started this culture of learn it all culture. And he would go to different departments to work to learn about what was happening in those departments so that he was knowledgeable. And the idea is that the head of the organization doesn't know it all, but is willing to be open and willing to learn from others. So how do you promote that? Because it all requires time. It requires teachers to go to each other's classrooms. It requires teachers to have the time to meet, to say, here are the topics I'm going to cover. Here are the topics you're going to take. Where is the transition of handing over the students from one group to the other group? If Because the more adults that there are, the more challenging it gets for the students. It also sometimes becomes too many cooks in the kitchen, right? And so, how do you balance that? You want to make sure that you're not having too many adults to do the work with a small group of children, because then they're going to lose their idea of autonomy. So, I would say, think about your school, your structure, and what kind of modeling do you do to help your staff become collaborators with each other? The other thing is, we'll talk more in detail later, but when I think in the chat somebody talked about conflict. Conflict is bound to happen. It happens whenever there are people working together. But what is the system in place where we can say, here is how we address a conflict, here is how we acknowledge? Something that I learned when I started my Montessori training, my mentor said to me, you should have a rule of offering 10 positive feedbacks to your student before you point out one negative. And those positive feedback that you offer has to be genuine. It has to be something that you have noticed this person doing. And it is so easy to notice what's not working, especially when, as a head of school, you're balancing so many different uh, ideas or so many different events and things that you have to do. But taking the time to pause and notice um, and listen to what is actually happening around us and say, okay, these are things that I appreciate, but then here is something that happened that I'd like to bring your attention to. And addressing uh, the behavior or the action that happened, but not necessarily blame the person. So continuing on the same thing about agreement versus disagreement. And I'll continue. Attack the problem, never the person. Be curious. Always lead with questions. Try to understand what actually happened, right? And we do this with our students in all of our conflict resolution. We have a community meeting. We have a peace table conversation. I was talking to one of the teachers who's worked at many schools over the past 30 years. And one thing she mentioned today was when she was at other schools, there was this siloed approach where the music teacher was responsible for the end of the year show, for the holiday concert, and it was the music teacher's job. The science teacher was responsible for the science work. The librarian was responsible for the library work, and the classroom teachers were responsible for the language, math, history, geography. But they never really collaborated and they never really met. And it was always this other person's job that, the teachers felt they didn't have to work together. And it felt like this overwhelming burden to have the entire school's presentation or performance to be done by the music teacher or the art teacher. And when there was a new leadership, and that leadership required everybody to work together. And she was like, what do you mean? I can work with the classroom teachers. I can put my materials in the classroom. And the whole learning just became more cheerful, more joyful. And I think just having a mindset shift, right, that we can be collaborative as opposed to siloed made a big difference. It also, I like to often look at other companies and say, what are they doing? And in Pixar, they have the brain trust model where we are going to all learn together. And there's going to be no judgment on things I don't know. So one of the things that's wonderful at our school is we've had this idea of mentorship in among the staff members. And so teachers can go to each other, or administrators can go to teachers can go to administrators, and they can work together. And they can go and say to each other, I'm having a trouble with this particular idea, or um, I have these questions about the student, or how do I don't know how to do this. And they can go without feeling fear. And that's a big part, because in many organizations, if an employee assumes or feels that they're going to be judged, and they don't want to look foolish, or they don't want to look like they don't know something, then they're not growing either. So how do you have this system where you empower the teachers to be lifelong learners? How do you do that? So uh, when when feedback is given, when teachers go and observe in each other's classrooms and they give feedback to each other, how do you structure that feedback form? What are things that they liked? What are things they didn't understand? What are things that could be better? So the criticism is then about their project and not about the person, or not about what the teacher has designed. And then every school has tough conversations, right? Whether it's with parents, whether it's with students, or with teachers, or board members also. And how do you set up a system for having those tough conversations? I just have a very simple rule about, I'm going to state the facts. It's going to be backed by data, and I'm not going to um, attack the person themselves. I'm going to keep the emotions out of this. And sometimes, if people are not ready, I often say, okay, I'm not ready right now to talk about this. Can we set a time later? Uh, Sometimes I can ask the person in front of me and say, is there another time we could meet about this? Because the emotions are running so high that it's just not possible. One thing that I've actually found very helpful is, when the emotions are high, I just take a walk with that person in the hallway. And it just that movement, getting out of the office, let's walk together, let's go get a drink of water and come back, just changes the mindset for both parties. So what I'd like to do is think about a time. We'll do this as an interactive activity. You may unmute yourself, or you may type in chat. Think of a time you had a tough conversation with a colleague or a parent that went well. What specific element of respect made it successful? So you can think, you can share. If you want to unmute, you may unmute and add your thoughts. I've had a parent who came in actually, and while some of you are thinking and adding to this conversation, I'm going to share one story. I had a parent, they'd been at a school for a while, and one day they said they came and just distraught at the car line in the morning. And the parent was crying, the child was crying, and I couldn't understand what could have gone wrong, because usually this child is very happy. And the parent came in saying that my child is being bullied. And that's a strong word, because we know that in our school that's not happening. Children are happy and they're working. But at the same time, I didn't want to not believe her or trust her. If there was something happening, I wanted to get to the bottom of that. And so when I asked the parent to come in, I said, why don't you park your car, come in, let's go in and talk. And she was just the emotions were running so high that we couldn't even have a proper logical conversation. And so I took note of it and I said, okay, let's meet again in the afternoon, but I'll keep an eye on your child. And we created a chart with three smiley faces, one happy face, one okay face, and one sad face. And throughout the day, I checked in with this child to see what the emotions were. And at the end of the day, we had some data to say, okay, he had a great day. All right, so now what is bothering you? And so now, because he had had a good day, the mother had had the time to come back, we were able to have a conversation, and the child was perceiving that some other students were teasing or calling names. And what I did was say, okay, let's let's keep this chart going for a few days. And for a week we followed up with that chart, and we realized that it was really this child's perception, and the teacher was also now able to stay on top of it. And every time the child felt that somebody was teasing, they were able to track it. And so by giving proper data and then saying, let's come up with a plan, we were able to resolve this both for the parent and for the child. And they're happy, they're continuing with the school. So that's one story. And let's see, the trust. Okay, so Julia, you can unmute and share the trust that had built upon prior tough conversations. Tell us about it.
Yeah, I feel like when you're having a tough conversation, you never want that to be the first time you talk to a parent or a colleague. Um, I find that it's a lot easier to have that conversation when you have that trust already built up and you have that relationship, that foundation to go back on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then thank you for sharing that. Mary Lou Cobb, listen first and seek to understand. If any of you would like to unmute and share a little more about what you said, that'll be great. But if you can't unmute, that's okay. And Dolores says, active listening and empathy have worked for me. I think listening is so important, that not to jump in and not to just assume or um, try to answer the question. Sometimes it's just okay to say, mm-hmm, yes, and acknowledge before before responding. It allows me to slow down. It allows me to kind of really think what's going on here. Heather, thank you. I have learned to discuss what the common goal is first between the two individuals. I ask them why they are at Montessori. Then we discuss how the goal is the same. We want our children to learn. Once you've built the foundational goal, then you can build upon it. Thank you for sharing that. I think the big question is why. And once every party understands why, then the conversation just gets easier or moves towards a resolution. The next thing I want to talk about parents as a pillar, as an important pillar of uh, the school or the child's education. And what we found over and over, and perhaps you can share this if you see it too, we found that parents, when they are aligned with the teachers, they don't necessarily have to be in agreement in everything that the teachers are doing or everything that the school is doing. But when they are aligned and they work together, there's a synergy and the child flourishes. When the parents don't trust the teachers, students know it somehow, by osmosis, they sense that. And when they sense that the adults are not aligned, they start falling through the cracks and they start performing poorly. And now the conflict gets even bigger because the parents don't feel that the child is making progress. The teachers frustrated because the child is not following directions or not listening. And so the gap between the parents and the teachers, or the school and the parents, increases. And so, how do we close that gap? Instead of being defensive, how can we be curious? And how can we understand the child, so that we can help them get better? So again, here, I would say if any of you would like to unmute and share strategies that have worked for you, you can do that. I'll just share on my end that, again, knowing that parents are partners has really helped. Having that trust. And as Julia said, having, don't, not to have that conversation for the first time, which is a negative or a conflict, is helpful. What are I think of it like a bank. Every time you give a positive feedback to a parent or share a positive story of progress, you are depositing in that bank of trust. And every time you give a negative feedback, you're withdrawing from that bank, right? That bank of trust. And so the more you deposit, then when you do have a negative feedback, you can withdraw from it. And the head of school plays such an important part in helping the teachers feel safe to give that feedback to the parents. When teachers know that the head of school and the board of trustees has their back, then the teachers feel confident in sharing the feedback. If they feel that, gosh, I'm going to give this feedback, but I have no idea what's going to happen tomorrow when the head of school knows about it. So educating the teachers, educating the administrators on how to communicate with parents is important, because in most trainings we learn about how do we teach lessons, how do we understand the child's uh, development, but not necessarily how they have to articulate their feedback to the parents. Um, at our school, we often do, before we do parent teacher conferences and before we do even parent meetings, we have a staff meeting where we talk to the teachers about what's a language we can use. And we have an education moment in the staff meetings where teachers can educate other teachers. So some of our veteran teachers share, what's a Montessori phrase for saying your child has been working on a certain material but hasn't mastered it yet. How do you explain that to the parents? What is, occasionally on the progress report, we have our rubric is the child is working on a material occasionally or is developing and has mastered. What does that even mean to a parent? And so how do we break that code for parents? What data are we giving to the parents so that they feel that on the continuum of their child's progress, the child is at a particular point? Because when we just give a progress report with a lot of Montessori jargon, do they really understand what we are saying or not? So all of those little pieces help in building the trust and then the collaboration between the parent and the teachers. The other great thing about having a small school, and I don't know about your school, how large it is. I would say if you have a large school, please chime in. Ours is a small school, and so parents, teachers, and families, administrators, we often get together for events. This morning we had a pancake breakfast for our upper elementary. So in Children's House and lower elementary, the parents come in and they work with the students. But in upper elementary, those parents have worked on the same Montessori materials since their child was in Children's House and lower. So upper elementary and middle school is a good time to showcase to the parents that yes, your child has learned those practical life activities. They can set the table, they can arrange flowers. I got these flowers from the pancake breakfast today. And they can set the table, they can make pancakes, they can serve you. And while they're doing that, they can showcase their work. You don't have to work with them on every single material. But parents get to see how their child has progressed. They can see the confidence when the child is presenting. And those are real concrete measures for a child, right? It's that you're also creating a place for parents to come together and network. So we saw parents, over a cup of coffee, talk about how their child has grown within this school year and why they like what they're seeing, and it just becomes an affirming, uh, positive, uplifting experience for parents. Um, think about your schools. What are some strengths that you have, and where do you bring your parents together? Do you do fundraisers? Uh, do you have any special projects that you do? I think we could stop here to kind of open in the chat or unmute and say, what are some things that you do at your school that allows parents, teachers, and board members or specialists to work together for a common goal? You can also put in chat or you can unmute. Annual auction. Yes, that does bring people together. Yeah, so today we had the parent visit, and in a couple of weeks we're going to have our auction. And outside every classroom there was um, a question mark, a mystery. So they had an empty frame, and we are doing our auction to raise funds for the outdoor garden. And so there's a butterfly, and the question is, what is coming up in this space? What's your child's masterpiece? And come bid on at the auction. But it did generate a lot of uh, conversation today in our at the event. So, how are we encouraging teachers to learn from each other? How are we encouraging the adults in the school, whether it's a parent or a teacher or an administrator? And so, one of the things we do is during our in-service week in at the beginning of the year in August, and then at the end of the year in June, we have 2 weeks dedicated, 1 week at each end, to help all the staff members, administrators, specialists, board members, advisors all get together and do some activities together. So they're learning from each other, and the music teacher may be teaching the fitness and the technology, and the science teacher to play the violin, or the fitness teacher is having them run races, and they're measuring their heart rate after each race. And so now they're actually stepping into each other's shoes to see, what does it really look like when I'm leading this class? There's a lot of laughter. So you can never, have go wrong with laughter and humor. Humor is such a big part of bringing people together. Food is another great thing to have together. We had a great STEAM fair. All of our teachers had worked really hard. We had so many snow days, and yet we pulled it all together. And so the science teacher said, "Hey, let's all go out for a drink." And we're like, "Okay, why not? We'd never done that before." And so we went to a local restaurant, and everybody just had a great time. And it was just not even a suggestion, it was just something, I just need a drink tonight, right? And yes, as adults, we can go have some fun together. And so that was, something small but exciting. So, what are some things that um, you can do in your school, or what do you do at your school to bring your staff members together? And if again, I'd like to be the learn from each other. And so, if you'd like to chime in, do share. You can always unmute, or you can sharing chat. But I'm sure all of us have some form of activities that we do with our staff.
Go ahead, Mary Lou, I see you.
Yeah, so I'm now retired, but I'm involved at the school still, and several schools actually as a consultant. But I like to think of this as we we know as Montessorians the importance of the prepared environment for the child, right? Well, the school is also a prepared environment for the adult, in my mind. And I think that we're all very blessed to have the opportunity to teach our children. That's my mindset to start with. So that when parents enter the school, one of the things that I'm mindful about is that a lot of parents are just nervous. They're very fearful. And the most precious thing they have is their child. And I think we as guides need to be very, very intentional in how we go about interacting with them. So, there's a multitude of overlays here with regards to helping the faculty to understand that mindset as well, but really welcoming the parents into the student and their students in simultaneously. And there are two different age groups, clearly. But it starts with that sense of welcoming and recognizing we all want to belong into a community. And so we have lots of activities for the faculty before school starts. As you mentioned, we go on a little retreat, if you will, and we discuss different topics about Montessori, but it's around food, sharing, swimming, that sort of thing. So that's the start of the year. But the year has a cycle. And so February and March is miserable in New England, and that's where I am, as are you, I gather. And you need to break it up again. And we've done things like had gone to the movies together because everyone's too tired to read. So I think you have to be also using the Montessori principle of observation and observe the, if you will, the mood of your children who are ready to climb the wall before spring break and their parents who are probably borderline hysterical in some instances. I dealt with a parent yesterday who actually was on the border of being hysterical. And I thought, if she could go away for 1 week and get some sunshine, I think this will be a new person when she comes back. So being aware of the cycles that we go through and understanding there are going to be highs and lows, but to be there as a recipient of all of those emotions and be the calm presence. So it's a big question you're asking, but I think it starts with the leadership. And then we as leaders in our school work very hard to help our teachers because as you said, they're not trained in those kind of communication skills. And a lot of it is listening. A lot of it is definitely, as Dolores said, empathy. It's not dismissive. It's really acknowledging that they are the primary educators, as you said. So I think it's all of these things together and helping one another. So that's just my comment on this.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Mary Lou. That was very well said. And Deb has in the chat, she says, in a few weeks, we will have a wellness day on a workshop day. We will have smoothies, other food, massages, a talk on digital fraud, and goodie bags. And that's great. So many things put together in a well-packaged day. So, in a Montessori classroom, we say, when Dr. Montessori said we must help the child to act, to exert their will, and to think for themselves, we also need to do the same for the adults in the school. In a Montessori classroom, children don't always come to the teacher or the guide for all the answers. They go to a peer. So in staff meetings or in your school, I would say, let's do an audit and think about, are teachers getting answers? Are parents, are the board of trustees getting answers from their peers? Or do they have to come to the head of school for all their answers? And the next few slides will look at that. In staff meetings, do we wait for the head of school to share all the details? are we just doing announcements in the staff meetings? Or are we really using that time to solve the challenges that the school is facing? So the next few slides are going to be more like a working form, so to say.
Rupali,
Yeah.
one second, I just want to make sure Dolores gets heard.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I can't see everybody on my screen.
Thank you, Julia. It was just she moved on, so I was like, I don't. It was just to share a few things that we do here with our staff to kind of build more teamwork. And we did sound bowl meditation. I learned how to play the sound bowls, and I played it for them. And then we do lunch. And one of the ones that they really enjoyed, I kind of asked them. I said, "Would you like to just do an end of the year right before winter break when, like Mary Lou said, we're all tired?" And I said, "Would you rather go out as we usually go and eat, or I'm happy to host at my house a murder mystery party?" And they all opted for that. And we had a lot of fun. Everybody came in character. So like listening to their ideas always works, and kind of bringing new things to we are a small school, so it's easier to do that in a small school, but just it builds a lot of camaraderie and that connection that is so needed with the children, with the families, but also with the staff. When it's there, and then it builds trust. So that's
Yeah.
all.
Yeah. And again, this is depositing that positive trust in your bank. I'll say, we are in New England, and it was an icy, stormy day yesterday. And one team member had a fall, and an important team member, and we had the parent visits today. But without me asking anybody to step in, everyone, even some of our part-time teachers and administrators, just volunteered to be here to take care of everything that needed to be done. And when you have made those positive deposits, then you've built a team that is thinking for the team. And it's not just one person making all the calls. I could have said, I need help, but I was like, okay, we're going to figure this out. But before I could figure it out, people had figured it out. And isn't that great? I think, to your point, that's the small school advantage. We are a small team. And I like to say that we are a small team, but a mighty team, because everybody then does what is required to be done. So I would say let's take a minute or two to look at your staff meeting, right? How do you run your staff meeting? Look at the agenda that you create for your staff meeting. And I hope everybody has an agenda for the meeting, because otherwise meetings they can get derailed to whatever one person's agenda is. So think about which item is a one-way announcement, like calendar updates or some housekeeping that needs to be addressed, safety instructions. Put all of those items in a bulleted email that goes out every Friday or Monday morning. These are just reminders, and it's a checklist. Every week we need to make sure these things are happening. Get them off your meeting, and then start auditing who is actually talking in your meeting. Is the head of school doing all the talking? Then people are not necessarily listening. Because if that's the case, then it becomes just like, okay, I've heard it, I don't need to pay attention, right? But if you have different people speak up, it's, for example, we have our science fair. All right, the science teacher is going to be the lead. We have a poetry recital coming up. The classroom teachers are going to have the lead in this meeting. We have to learn how to use a progress report. All right, the technology teacher is going to show us and is going to demonstrate, and it becomes a working meeting where everybody is rolling up their sleeves and is actually getting to the meat of whatever needs to be done, as opposed to be listening to the head of school. So look at your agenda. I would say do this as an exercise. And then part two, you can say, how are you going to change your agenda? What is a little tweak you're going to make in your agenda so that it allows for people to collaborate? And so something that I learned from my business network meetings was that everybody at the beginning gets 30 seconds to share whatever they want. It doesn't have to be just Montessori. It could be Montessori, or it could be a win from the week. It could be something from their house, something from their personal lives. And we go around. It's so interesting because everybody has something to share, but we are so busy getting through the school day that no one has really the time to connect. But during the staff meeting, they can tell a quick story from the classroom. They can share their challenges, their frustrations. It allows people to kind of just talk, and that becomes somebody can piggyback on that topic and then add to it. So again, keep it like really time bound, because you don't want that to become the main part of the agenda, but it allows people to start sharing, and you're not putting anyone on the spot. I did have, at the beginning of my career as a head of school, people thought that they didn't know what to share. And so we had to do a little bit of training on that. We had prompts. And sometimes I would say, you could even play a game where you say that, all right, this week I'd like you to team up with a classroom teacher or a specialist. And then next week in the staff meeting, you're going to be that person. You're going to speak in that person's voice as that person. So you can change it up a little bit. The other part is acknowledging your peers. What did you notice that they did that helped, whether it was somebody helping you, or you can have that as a form, and we'll come to that later, or you can even do it as on the spot. Like, is there something you noticed or acknowledged? In one school, I saw they had a tree of hearts, and they had these heart sticky notes. And anybody, whether it was a parent, student, or teacher, they could pick a heart and they could write an acknowledgement that they saw, and they stuck it on that tree. And so you can be as creative as you want. You can then go into, we call it the meat, the nuts and bolts of the meeting, the main portion, where you can do the brain trust idea, which is from the Pixar company. And one teacher can present a specific challenge, much like your community meetings in the classroom. I would take a positive discipline community meeting format, and you present it. Everybody gives their feedback. You get to vote on it, or you get to resolve it, and then you celebrate with it. But again, don't focus on any judgments. There's no focus on the presenter themselves. It's really the issue at hand that we are looking at. And then you can wrap up by, items that have to be done, who's doing what for the events upcoming, or tasks that you have to be doing. And so you can keep the meeting moving. And that way, everybody's had a turn to speak. Everyone's had a turn to voice their concerns. And it's a collaborative meeting. And here is the, for sharing the community meeting problem, you can have the teacher be prepared to share the challenge, and perhaps the teacher has come to you and has mentioned it to you, and you've brainstormed some ideas for the teacher to ask questions. This is where you also have to coach your teachers, because this is something we do not learn in our training. The other team members can then ask clarifying questions to understand really what is the problem. And then there's some brainstorming. You can use sticky notes. And finally, you can end it with a solution if you have one. And if you don't have, you can add it to your agenda. We found that some questions are for the board to answer, or some questions are going to be for the in-service day meeting at the end of the school year, or some is going to be for the professional development day. And we can then start saying, okay, here is a scope that we can address right now, and here's a scope we can leave it for later, and we make a note of it for the agenda that will happen in the end of the year. So you can kind of build your agenda for your in-service days or your retreat throughout the school year. And then the autonomy, each teacher can decide what they want to talk about. So it's not dictated by the head of school. And then it truly becomes what's really going on in the classrooms, in your special classes, or in the board where people are thinking about these concerns. And finally, let me go back one slide. This is just, I talked about the tree of hearts, but you could also have this as a form that you have. I'm sending this shout out because I saw you modeling blank, and they can fill that in. And so this just becomes a prompt for you to get that culture of noticing and observing. Mary Lou mentioned about observations, but here is when you can say, I saw you do this, and that was great. And here's a shout out. Or you can, for somebody we have a parent who's leading our gardening project. We have so many hopes and dreams for our school, but we just don't have the bandwidth to do it all. And so one of the parents, she put together a great plan, and hey, that's a good shout out for the newsletter, in the newsletter, to highlight that parent's contribution. So you can think about it, not just the teachers, but also you can have a shout out for students or parents who have contributed that week. So with that, I'll open the floor for questions or comments, or share your ideas that you have developed at your school, and what works at your school for developing a culture of respect and collaboration. Thank you.
Rupali, I have a question for you about you're doing these meetings weekly?
Yes.
And how do you, at our school, we have staff that kind of staggers sometimes. So what time do you find best that you can all meet together, and how do you do this? And
so our school ends at 5 o'clock. And what happens is the classroom teachers are done at 3:45. So 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock, the classroom teachers and the administrators can meet, and they can talk about things that are happening in the classroom that are related to classroom or curriculum or events. And then 5 to 5:30, we have the after school teachers or specialists who join in, and they can then add their 30 seconds of round robin. We call it 30 seconds round robin, and they can add that, and they get a chance to share their thoughts in the last 30 minutes. So the last 30 minutes are really school-wide ideas. We have an auction coming up. We have a fan event coming up. That's like our biggest event in the school year. And so everybody's voices are heard during that time.
thank you.
Again, sometimes you don't get all the specialists together on one day. We try to do them all on one day, but people who miss out, then either an administrator or a teacher or I will bring them to speed. We do set aside professional development days. That's when we bring an outside vendor to take care of the students. So like maybe a puppeteer or African drumming class. So the children are occupied and are with professionals. but then the teachers can meet and we are not necessarily attending to the students that day. Well, thank you so much for participating. I enjoyed learning from you and also sharing what has been working for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rupali. I hope everyone can join us next week. We have Camilla back with us, and we're talking about how Montessori marketing is changing and how Montessori Thrive is changing our services to better reflect that. So I hope everyone can join us, and I hope you all have a great day.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
you.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you. Bye.